Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
Happy Father's Day again. Good to see everybody. Breathing that in. So, for those of you who were here last year, and I think I did it the year before as well, I tried to change the whole world by not doing Father's Day and Mother's Day. I did Parents' Day and Family Day. And the reason why I did that is because our world has changed so much from when these holidays were created. So often when you're doing Mother's Day and Father's Day, you have to follow it with all the exceptions because there's so many different variables and different ways people are doing families now, and how we understand families is shifting so much that it felt very confusing to do just like very, very polar opposite things. But then I realized that really didn't work. The world did not change with me. So I'm back to doing Mother's Day and Father's Day. And so I want to explain it spend a little time with it, just even understanding masculine, and I'm doing it versus masculine and feminine energy. So looking at the masculine energy in our life and understanding that. Remember, a theme for the year is your spiritual journey, the greatest love story ever told. So what I learned in my social psychology class in 1980s sometime is that there's actually different ways we can look at, we even took tests. So there's qualities that we associate with the feminine, and so that's one end of the spectrum, and then you have the other end of the spectrum that we associate with masculine. So you take this test, and it's sort of, you can be a little bit leaning towards the more feminine qualities or leaning more towards the masculine qualities. But there's other variables too. So there's some people who actually are kind of neutral. They don't actually test very high on either one, masculine or feminine. They're just, But then there's this whole other group. And I think it's who we are becoming, which is why it gets confusing with the old languaging. There are those who test very high on the feminine and on the masculine. That we're evolving to no longer being, that's this whole idea of non-binary. You might have heard this term, non-binary, which is that we are all of it, and the more we are conscious and actively activating those energies in our life, the feminine and the masculine, it's hard to just identify and say, this is all that I am. So I know with my parents, I can say there's areas that my dad was very masculine, my mom was very feminine, and vice versa. Sometimes my mom was more masculine, feminine. I think Julian would certainly say that about his parents. We cross roles, right? Have you all, and in your own life, do you see that? So it's important to acknowledge that. And so that's why it's hard to say Father's Day as if fathers aren't loving and nurturing and gentle and caressing their kids. It's a both and. I think too, when we have this discussion, we do have to recognize there is a biological component to it. So the hormones primarily. So estrogen does impact people who have a lot of estrogen, and we all have different degrees of hormones. So if you have a lot of estrogen, you tend to be a little bit more on the emotional side. If you have more testosterone, you might have a lot more of assertiveness in your life. None of these are hard and fast rules. For all of you who have all the exceptions that you have in your head, yes, those are true too, but I can't speak to everything in one talk. So generally speaking, that the hormones impact us, but it doesn't have to limit us ever. So what feminine energy is the primary energy of feminine energy is connection, and connection through feelings. So when you're in a circle, or women will often face each other or be in a circle and share how we feel. And it's very important in this connection. It's not that men don't do connection, but it's the way women do connection, which is, I get it, I had that same experience. So the intention in the feminine is to show how we are like the person that we're hearing. I've had this experience, and so and I tell you my experience to meet your experience, so you know that I hear what you're saying. I feel you. Often there's tears involved. But it's a wonderful connection. That's a high priority for the feminine energy. Now for masculine energy, the priority is different. There's still connection, But that connection is about autonomy. We're going to start first with autonomy, then we're going to go to uniqueness, and then agency. So autonomy. When men talk, they have a little different intention. And I shouldn't say men, masculine energy, and we have both, remember. So I'm not talking about that part of you that's masculine, to differentiate. So someone says something, and I'm more likely in the masculine energy to say how I'm different than that. I push myself a little bit away from that. I have my own way of doing things. And so when men talk, it's more, there's a one-upmanship, but it's not a one-upmanship to put the other person down. It's to clarify that I am my own person. You know, the intention is not to connect and say we're the same. The intention is to say I'm different, I'm independent, I'm autonomous, I'm my own person. And so what we want to recognize is how important this masculine energy is. We forget. We've had, even within our CSL, the topics for the last 4 months have been vulnerability, authenticity, shadow work, self-care. These are all very strong feminine energy values that we're cultivating. We don't want to forget about how important that masculine energy is. To find your inner voice. When we think about what evolution is, it is a big part of, especially as we're growing up, is individuating ourselves from our parents, individuating ourselves from our environment. What's my inner voice saying? That's what autonomy is, listening to my inner voice and having the autonomy to follow it. So I'm listening to my inner voice. If I don't have a masculine energy modeling that for me, what happens? I was listening to these various TED Talks, and one thing I've learned is that 90%, and this is from different people, I heard the same statistic, 90% of the kids, the teens that are houseless, that do not have homes, or out in the streets, don't have fathers. They're fatherless. 71% of the people who drop out are fatherless. And the statistics just keep getting worse. I won't keep going. But mental health, cognitive, on every level, not having that father, that masculine energy, because everyone has different relationship with that, but not having that masculine energy impacts our ability to grow and develop at the very most important times in our life, which is to find our own voice. It's wonderful. So either one of these, too much, is we know, becomes unhealthy. So too much feminine energy is I'm connecting so much with other people and feeling, I actually don't know what my voice is. I don't know what I think or feel about things. How many women have felt, well, I shouldn't say women, people have felt that in a relationship. I get so in tune with the people around me that I actually can't say what I want or what I think or what I value. That's called codependency. That's feminine energy without that masculine energy to balance it out. Masculine energy shadow side, if it doesn't have the feminine, is it can't connect. It becomes an island unto itself, and you become very isolated, very alone, and disconnected. There's just a strong disconnect from you and the world around you. So all of us hopefully have a healthy dose of masculine and feminine because they need each other to be mentally healthy. And our kids need it to be mentally healthy. And so I want to share a story about a kid who is mentally healthy, just has that autonomous spirit. And I shared this story, I think it was a long time ago, so most of you probably haven't heard it. Beth and Gloria probably have. They've heard everything. And Michelle. But there was a young girl who loved ballet. It's the oldest daughter of Rob and Ellie. Rob and Arisa, their daughter Ellie. She loved ballet. And Rob would tell me that she would go, when they lived in Okinawa, she would take 3 buses. This is when she's a little girl. Get on 3 buses to go to her ballet lessons. 5 or 6 days a week, right? She knew who she was. She had that autonomous voice. She wasn't waiting for someone. She did it. And I actually never liked ballet, and then I saw this movie called Center Stage, and it was the first time I got it. Oh, this is great. And there was some dancers in there who were, it's a Hollywood movie, but they had some professional dancers, and one of them was Julie Kent, and she's danced with American Ballet Theater. And so I got curious about ballet. So I looked up, and the only at that time, VH videos that they had was of a ballet called Le Corsaire. So I got it, and it was very traditional ballet. And I was watching, and I'm like, I bet my little niece, Ellie, would like this. So I mailed it to them. And I don't know if it's true, but Rob said she would watch it every morning, Le Corsaire, and go to her ballet practice. Well, the family, they have 3 lovely children, and they moved from Okinawa to Cleveland, and I believe Ellie, if I get the details wrong, you don't have to correct me afterwards. You weren't here before when I told the story, so it's a little, I think I got it basically right, maybe not the details. I believe she was in 8th grade when you moved here, and she, as you know, when you're moving, it's hard to get into the new culture. People have history, and she's also from another country. Her first language is Japanese. So she's beginning in the ballet world, and in her ballet class, they say, well, there's a ballet company coming to Cleveland, and they need some kids from our ballet school to dance in the ballet with them. So they picked, Ellie was one of the girls that they picked, and so she went to the rehearsals. And the ballet theater company that came turns out to be American Ballet Theater. Remember, she's watching that VHS. And the ballet they're doing is Le Corsaire, and it's starring Julie Kent. Just extraordinary. When we follow that inner voice, the entire universe conspires for our good. Everything conspires for good in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. That our inner voice knows things that we maybe intellectually can't know. When we're trying to figure out what what our next course or guidance, and we're doing pros and cons, the problem with pros and cons is we're limited to what we know. Spirit knows something intuitively that our rational mind may not be able to know. And so that's why children are so fun to watch, because they haven't learned to edit out that part of herself, although Ellie is still an incredibly autonomous, amazing young woman living in Tokyo, and we follow her on Instagram because she has so many adventures. She's still that same adventurous, autonomous, beautiful being of light who is an incredible dancer as well. Autonomy, know your voice. When you follow that voice, even if it seems counterintuitive, it's going to have incredible impact on you and everyone around you, and the entire universe is going to conspire for your good. The entire universe is conspiring for your good. The power of knowing your inner voice. Uniqueness. So as I said, part of that masculine energy, they're not trying to say, I'm the same as you, but I'm unique, I'm different than you. And sometimes, I think it's harder for women than men. Sometimes it's harder to say, I'm a little bit different than you. I agree with you, but I feel actually this way or that way, or I tend to do things this way. So again, it's learning how to both connect, relate, but at the same time, allow ourselves to be different and unique. Because the key here is that we are irreplaceable. You hear this, right? We're irreplaceable. But it's actually true. You are irreplaceable. You know, the thumbprint, no matter how hard you create, you are not going to change. I mean, I guess you could cut off your thumb, but the thumbprint, you were born with that. And mirroring that is we each have a soul print. 8 billion people on this planet, all the billions of people that have lived on this earth, every one of us, it's an infinite universe. Remember we say infinite? It's an infinite universe. Nobody has your soul print. Nobody. So for you to find that autonomous inner voice and allow yourself to be that unique self, to know that you are irreplaceable, and if you don't show up as you, nobody else on this universe is going to. You have a specific calling. We talk about callings like some people have them and some people don't. Everybody has a calling. And to honor that and take it seriously. This is what the masculine energy tells us to do. This is the way my brother Rob and I were raised. Find what you're good at. My mom always said that I don't want to have 4 kids that are exactly the same. I want 4 kids that are absolutely owning their own voice, who they are. And we are all very different. Because that's how the universe is. So if we're trying to get everyone to look the same, that's what I love about our community, by the way. We honor all paths. We don't say you have to do it this way or that way. Everyone comes in with your own way of doing things, and that's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be unique and irreplaceable. I think of, and it's an important thing because I think sometimes we try to do it like somebody else, or we think, well, they did it this way, so I should be able to do it that way. I hear that a lot. Well, if they can do it, I can do it. But I'm not supposed to do it the way someone else does it. The story that I always think of is I think of Franklin Roosevelt, who became a great president, carried us through the Depression, World War II, an amazing man, had polio, so grateful he played the role that he played. And then, and that when he had polio, a lot of people had polio, they didn't have a vaccination yet, and there was, and people dealt with it. And then for those of you, I always think of, pretend you never heard me before. Then there's the Wilma Rudolph. Okay, let me just, how many of you know Wilma Rudolph? Who knows the story of Wilma? Oh, a few of you, great. So Wilma Rudolph also had polio. She grew up in a poor, she's black, grew up in a poor little town in about an hour outside of Nashville, I believe. And she was the 22nd child of her parents, so they were a poor, this is in the 40s. And her mother took her into the doctor, gave her crutches, he showed her exercises that she could do with her daughter, taught her, Wilma, these exercises. Wilma couldn't even go to school for a long time, but she just did these exercises on herself relentlessly. And even, she said, so much time would go by and saw no improvement whatsoever, but she didn't give up. So part of your autonomous voice is being resilient and strong. You don't give up. Oh, well, everyone else, no one else can do this. Why should I do this? Resilience and strength comes with autonomy and uniqueness. So she keeps doing her exercises. And by age 12, she surprises everyone at her church. She stands at the doorway. She throws her crutches to the side and walks down the aisle. It's the first time they've ever seen her walk through doing her exercises. She continues to do her exercises. Okay, you ready for this? By age 16, she's running in the Olympics and gets a world record. She's the fastest woman in the world. From polio to the, I think she ended up winning several medals, to the fastest woman in the world. That's her story. That is her autonomy and resilience and strength, and she doesn't follow what everyone else's story is with polio. But then other people with polio say, well, I should do that. No, you should do what you're supposed to do. Franklin Roosevelt did what he did. He still had polio, but he had a different role. We all have different roles, and so we can be inspired by someone, but the thing we want to be inspired by other people is not to mirror them, but to say, oh, look, when they follow their inner voice, look what they were able to do. What's going to happen to me if I follow my inner voice with incredible strength and resilience and persistence, that I believe in my voice so much that no matter what anyone else is doing, I'm going to follow it. That's what we want to mirror. Yes? Yeah. So Carl Jung, that was his idea of what the Christ was. The Christ, he said, was not about walking around in a robe and sandals to imitate Jesus. The idea of the Christ consciousness, or the Atman consciousness, or the Buddha consciousness, is the individualized God consciousness within all of us. And our job is to live that God consciousness on every level and dimension of our being, which is a full-on uniqueness that nobody else can give us except from within. That's what self-realization is about. Autonomy, uniqueness, and then agency. This is also a masculine term, and this is the ability to carry out. So when Ellie has her voice, she didn't just have this, I'm a dancer. She took 3 bus rides to learn ballet. Wilma Rudolph did what she needed to do. Roosevelt did what too. Agency is the ability to carry through with our autonomous voice, to act on it. Agency is the ability to act on it. And what it, and there's another part of this that I want to talk about, which is within that masculine energy, there is a striving. So feminine energy is very about nurturing. I love you just as you are. You're whole, perfect, and complete. I hold you, I embrace you, I nurture you. We all need that. We all need that. We all need that. So much of self-care is that about loving ourselves just where we are. Masculine energy is about striving, to pushing the borders, to pushing our boundaries of what we think is possible, to move beyond where we ever thought we could go. So I've been talking about Jesse Isler lately, and to me, he's an example of this masculine energy. He goes on he pushes himself physically, and now he's got everybody else involved doing the same things. Last year, he did an ultra marathon where it was like crazy, 264 miles riding a bicycle, swimming a crazy amount, the equivalent of 2 marathons. He did it all in a day. He was the last person. He was 53, and he was the last. That was pushing myself. Mechanics are not my strength. I know Jack's sitting up there. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get there. I did it. He pushes himself to his limit. The way Ken Wilber talks about it is in terms of masculine spirituality, is that the masculine energy, the way often we feel it is when we push our physical boundaries towards death. There's this drive towards pushing to the extreme. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what Jesse and all his friends are doing all the time. They're pushing the possibilities of what their body can actually do. Ken Wilber was a meditator for decades. And then he started in his 50s really working out for the first time and pushing his limits physically in a way that he had never done it before. And he said, I'm actually reaching the same states when I'm pushing my limits physically than when I'm sitting on the meditation pillow. And then he started having all these conversations with athletes and this going into the zone. And the going into the zone, so when you're playing a sport, and this is true for all life, but I'm just using sports right now, is you have the rules of the game. You know how to play it. You've learned the skills. You've been practicing over and over. You got the fundamentals down. The zone is when you finally can let go and move into another state. And so all of these athletes were talking about pushing their bodies so extreme that they had to, it just gets to and often competition makes you do that. They finally get to a point where they have to let go and let something else move in. And you're moving into another spiritual state, a higher state of being, where they could do things in that higher state that they could not do as long as they were staying in control, as long as they were still focusing on the rules and the fundamentals, and my arm has to move this way or that way. And I remember, actually, this was a football player. He said when he really started learning it, he started thanking his opponents because he recognized the harder their opponents, the more they were pushing him to go beyond where he thought he could go. The easy opponents weren't any fun because they weren't pushing him past his boundaries, past what they think is possible. So in this agency, we have the agency to move past our boundaries, not to say, oh, I have a boundary here, and I'm always supposed to be happy and at peace and enjoy, so I'm not supposed to have this boundary, so I quit. The masculine energy says, no, anything is possible in spirit, and if I have an inner voice, this isn't just like, it's not me trying to be a basketball player, but my calling, in your calling, everyone has a calling to push ourselves. When we have those, every one of us has these walls saying, no, you can't do that. That's impossible. To push beyond that is the place we want to get to, because that gets us into those higher realms. And that includes everybody. So, I mean, we see it. I love you have Larry Bird and Magic Johnson so not liking each other and then really liking and respecting because they were at a different place. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. I keep seeing these examples of people who push each other, and so the enemies become the friends. That's important. The enemies become the friends. So when we follow our inner voice, it takes us to our fullest potential, but we never arrive. We're going to be doing this until the day we die. So even as we're accepting our life and at peace and in joy and nurturing and loving, we're always, wherever we are, whatever's going on, if we have a voice, a calling to push, we strive for even more. So what does this look like when we're all doing it? When we're all following our inner voice? And for me, an example was when Russia attacked the Ukraine, and Stephanie Fish, who is at a Unitarian church here, they're very social activists, and she immediately said, we've got to raise money. There's an organization of doctors who are going into the Ukraine to serve the people there. Let's raise money for them. So she's very smart. So she asked Jack, she said, hey, Jack, can you help me create a benefit? Now, I don't know if you know about this about Jack, but it's Father's Day, so I can give him a little promotion here. So he once, in the 80s, he worked for WMMR, and he was their promotions director, and WMMR was the #1 station in the country, and he got, Billboard magazine flew him into DC to win the Billboard magazine Promotion Director of the Year. He's been promoting benefits since forever. He always tells me these great stories. So she contacts him and says, can we create a benefit? Jack gets on the phone with all his musician friends. They create a benefit. They connect. There's a family in Livermore who have a restaurant called Americano, and they're a Ukrainian family. So they connect with that family. So Stephanie's following her inner voice. We've got to do something. She's going to do something. She connects with Jack. He follows his inner voice. He's a music guy, so he does it his way by getting a lot of musicians together and getting the word out, connecting with this restaurant. I don't know how we knew that they were Ukrainian, but you connected with them. And then through that connection, he happened to meet their son, who's like 6'8" or something, this huge guy. And they're talking. He's like, oh, yeah, I play football at University of Puget Sound. You know what? We need a wide receiver. Maybe your son would want to do that. Jack tells Julian. Julian's following his autonomous spirit. He didn't wait for us. He grew up in Montessori. He has our teaching, our people here. He's like, I think I'm going to reach out and connect with him and send him my tapes. We didn't even know he was doing it. Julian just took it and ran because he was following his autonomous spirit. So, and they raised a ton of, how much money? $7,000 in that benefit for the Ukrainians. Yeah. Everybody is following our inner voice, and you've heard that, the St. Augustine quote, where the center of God, we are each the center of God where there is no circumference. We are each the center of God where there is no circumference. When we're following that autonomous call and we're following through and we're striving, it impacts everybody. Everybody there was following their autonomous call, and it was serving everybody's highest good. This is what we're supposed to be doing on this planet. We are supposed to be hearing that our call, a sacred call that every one of us was born with, to follow it, to have the agency and the willingness to be strong and be unique and follow it, and it becomes for everybody's highest good. This is the flow, the harmony of why we are here. And then we have the feminine energy to nurture us when we feel like we failed. To care for us and love us and say, even when we haven't fulfilled that, we're still loved. I'm actually serious, though. We need both of those. Oh, yeah. So Kevin, who is the Ukrainian couple's son, showed his coaches the film or something, and so Julian is going to University of Puget Sound in the fall. And the connection, the attunement, as he's beginning to talk about it, I have a dream about him going to Puget Sound, but now he's 18, so I don't tell him because I'm like, nope, he's on his own now. I'm done telling him. And then 2 months later, Julian goes, I had this dream, and it was like the exact same dream I had. And so you know that you're in, like, it's this knowing that everything is in alignment. Isn't that cool? And we think of Ellie and her story. It's like everything's in alignment. But it requires each of us to have the responsibility and take the energy to follow that voice and to take it very seriously. And then just lastly, the self-realization, just as a plug for our group on Tuesday. That's Yogananda's group, but this is what Yogananda is always striving for, is to move beyond what we think we know about reality, and not just, he's very big on, don't just believe it, have the direct experience. Strive. Spirituality, there's an acceptance, but there is a striving. Strive to say, this is possible. Strive. Sit in meditation. Do the practices. Make yourself uncomfortable. Strive to have these experiences that take us to a higher realm. And so I think of even something like a phrase that many of us are familiar with, love your enemies. But when you think about it, this isn't tolerate your enemies, put up with your enemies. It's not just pray for your enemies. It's love your enemies. And when we think of how hard that actually is when you try to, at least, okay, I'm just going to speak for myself, how hard it is for me when I actually try to practice that. Because it's one thing to love people that might be hard to love, but there's people who, to me, are just intolerable and unacceptable. I'll never forget that word that Mark Anthony Lord came here and talked about. Unacceptable. This is unacceptable. And so what I know for myself anyways, and I'm suggesting for all of us, humanly, it's actually really almost impossible to love someone who you find unacceptable, who you find intolerable. I mean, you can be nice about them, you can say Pollyannish things, but I mean deep love. Think of the people that you've loved the deepest. That's the same love that Jesus was talking about when he's saying love your enemies. He wasn't talking surface love. He's talking about deep love. How do you get to that place? You can't. We can't humanly. As Sri Aurobindo said, our role on this planet is not just to become superhuman beings. We actually have to move to a different state of consciousness. And that's, going back to the sports analogy, the best players are the people who are not operating on the same level of consciousness. They moved. That's what we have to do. That's what our spirituality is demanding of us, is to move beyond our way of doing things humanly. Humanly, I am incapable of loving people who I find unacceptable and intolerable with some of the things that they do. It just makes me cringe and makes me angry. The only way that love is going to happen is if I move to a whole nother reality that I can't access just with my rational mind, that has an ability to see and to love way beyond what we can do humanly. Love your enemies. All these that's just one. All these spiritual truths are calling us to a place that we have to move to a whole nother level to be able to embody and to express. And that is our calling. That's all of our collective calling. So we have our individual callings, but if we're on the spiritual journey, we have the collective calling to go beyond just what we can do humanly and start moving into these other expanded states of consciousness. Spirit doesn't just love the unacceptable people. It doesn't just tolerate. It's not like a superficial love. Spirit is passionately in love with those people that we call unacceptable and intolerable. This is our journey, and this is what the masculine energy is offering us. The father energy. So I just want you to think about the masculine energy in your life. Just for a second, imagine not having it. Whatever, and I'm talking about everything has a shadow, so I'm not talking about the shadow today. The positive part of the masculine energy that you've had in your life as a child, maybe the masculine energy you have inside of you. Hopefully you bless that masculine. And what if it wasn't there? And just think of all the people on our planet who don't have that guiding force to follow their inner voice, that strength and that resilience and that ability and that capacity to individuate and be unique, that capacity to follow through and strive to fulfill that inner voice. And we see how important that masculine energy is on this planet. Sometimes it gets dismissed. And so we have to remind ourselves how essential this energy has been in our life and how we are modeling that for others who need it. And so I invite you today to connect with those people who've been that masculine energy in your life. Your father, your friends, siblings, aunts, uncles, whoever's been that masculine energy, thank them. Thank them for who they've been in your life because they've been a gift. They've had a huge impact on all of us, this masculine energy, and our planet wouldn't be what it would be so we talk a lot about moms. There's a lot of energy around thanking your mom and being grateful for the mom. And I'll say that I was listening to a talk by a divorce lawyer. It was very interesting. She's been doing it for 20 years. And she said the interesting thing that she found was that most of the men that she was dealing with, and she said it's just anecdotal, it's just from the men that I've been dealing with in 20 years, feel like they are secondary to the mother in their kid's life. That the mother's the one that's really important, and they're sort of a side person. And so when the divorce happens, it really hits hard. And she said, that's not how kids feel. They know how important the masculine is, but we have this thing about mothers, but we forget it's just as important to thank the fathers or the masculine energy. I know we all have different experiences. The positive masculine role models that you've had in your life, that is just as important. Because you know what's sad? 3 to 5, what's it? Men commit suicide 3 to 4 times higher than women. 3 to 4 times higher, and it increases as they get older. They are not dismissible. They are not just a byproduct of the family life. They are essential. They are important. And we talk about the patriarchy and we assume, oh, the patriarchy, of course they know they're important. But let's just remember that every masculine energy is an individual. When we generalize, we leave out so much. Bless and give thanks for the masculine. Can you do that for me? Well, not do it for me, do it for yourself. Give thanks for that father energy in your life. And for those of you who play that masculine energy in somebody else's life, thank you. Is there anyone who, we have a few men. Well, no, I don't. Because then it gets weird. This is why I have the whole masculine, feminine thing. And all right, so we're just giving thanks for all of you who play that masculine role in people's lives, for the people who played masculine roles in your life, and how the masculine energy, we talk so much about the negative these days and the shadow side and all the harm it's done. We forget how much good it is doing every day. So let's go into prayer. And when we go into this prayerful place, we are not going to separate the energies of masculine and feminine, because we are going to enter into that awareness that there is only one power and one presence. Only one. It contains all of it. It contains the masculine and the feminine and that which is beyond all human concept. And so we just breathe for a minute and allow ourselves to rest in just the pure awareness of being in this moment. For we know that all of this wonderful energy, whatever we name it, whatever we call it, it's all the divine. These different categories and spectrums, it is all the way love is knowing itself into form, into creation. And so we see and feel and know this love that was birthed, that existed before any of this creation ever existed and will be here for all eternity. This love that birthed cosmos, the galaxies upon galaxies of creation. This love that has birthed this galaxy system, this beautiful earth. Every blade of grass, every grain of sand, every eyelash, every atom and cell of our being, everything is created in, through, and as this infinite oceanic love. We immerse ourselves in this love. We trust this love at the very center of our being, that this love knows exactly who it is as each of us. It knows exactly. It is not unclear. It is not a mystery. It knows, and it knows that it knows. And so it is with great joy that each and every one of us turn our attention into that infinite knowingness that is within our very being, that intuitively is already there. And we say yes to that knowing. We say yes to that call. It is that call that birthed us into this creation at this point in time and space. It called us to be fully ourselves. We are so grateful to be fully ourselves, that we are like nobody else, to the person to the right of us, to the left of us, in front of us, behind us, online, at the grocery store, in our families, in our workplace. We are completely unique and beautiful lights of pure spirit. And we are here as a blessing and as a gift. A blessing and a gift for every being on this planet. When we listen and follow that beautiful voice, we are an eternal blessing. We are an infinite blessing that we just can let go of and trust and allow it to move us into the realms that we are supposed to live in and be in. And at the same time, we choose to strive to become our greater yet to be. We choose to reach for the stars. We choose to reach for the fulfillment of our own self-realized, enlightened creation, to exist in a way that's never existed before. We are that starlight that has never existed and will never exist again. We honor that with sacredness and grace. And we honor the fathers in our world, the masculine. And so for those who have those masculine energy on the other side of the veil, we just take this moment of time, just a brief moment of silence, and thank them for the gifts that they've been in our life. And we give thanks knowing that positive male energy continues, that we carry that light and that love in our heart and our mind and our body and our soul, and we continue to allow it to shine through and as us. We continue to open and see all people for exactly who they are, just as they are, without having to fit them into categories anymore. We just see spirit, we just see love, and we allow love to shine exactly as love needs to shine in each and every 8 billion people on this planet, every sentient life form, animals, plants, the earth itself, the stars, all life, right now. We are it, and it is us. And we end just in full-orbed gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mother, Father, God, infinite love, intelligence of the universe. Thank you. Thank you. In deep abiding peace, we let it be, as we say together, and so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I say.